I would like to introduce Maudlyne Ihejirika. And she is an award-winning 29-year Chicago Sun-Times reporter and columnist, most recently penning its Chicago Chronicles column on racial, social, and economic justice issues impacting Black and Brown communities. Retiring from the Sun-Times November 2022, she now writes on racial equity issues for national publications, serves as a TV political analyst, and oversees journalism grants for the Field Foundation of Illinois. Author of the 2016 memoir, Escape from Nigeria, a memoir of faith, love, and war, she is a sought-after speaker who has provided university commencement speeches and holds an honorary doctorate of humane letters from St. Xavier University. She is immediate past president of both the Chicago Journalists Association and the National Association of Black Journalists Chicago chapter. And she was inducted into the Hall of Achievement at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism in 2020, and the Hall of Fame at the University of Iowa School of Journalism and Mass Communication in 2018. Outlier attendees, please give a warm welcome to Maudlyne.
Wow, I am so excited to be here. Good morning, friends. Thanks to all of you for joining this final keynote session of Outlier 2024. For those of you converging here from points abroad or from elsewhere in the US, welcome to my hometown. I hope you have enjoyed the conference thus far, and that in the past 2 days and throughout this afternoon, you'll have heard and learned much that you can take home and apply to your own work. For those of you watching from home, I should say that I hope you will have learned much that you can take into the next room, the home office. As mentioned, I am Maudlyne Ihejirika, a lifelong Chicagoan and a journalist. Though not a data visualist, I've spent much time in decision-making about what good data storytelling looks like. Also, much time on how data visualization can propel journalism's messages about the hidden realities of our troubled world today. In this session, I will share a broad arc on the evolution of journalism, on a journey exploring the hands-in-glove relationship that we journalists share with those of you who toil in the data visualization field. Along the way, I'll share a few examples of excellent data storytelling in journalism, visualization that can convey a full story at a glance, using tools ranging from simple charts and graphs to powerful interactive dashboards and motion graphics. What you're seeing right now are some examples of stories that I've written for the Chicago Sun-Times. The goal of these visualizations, the best ones that I'm going to show you, are always to help journalists grab and hold the short attention span of today's fickle digital audience. So, a little background. I've spent nearly 40 years in journalism and communications, 29 of those as first a news reporter and then a columnist at the Chicago Sun-Times newspaper. And yes, newspapers still exist. Over my career, I've covered beat assignments from crime and the inner city to housing and education, politics and philanthropy, serving as assistant city editor and then weekend city editor. If you visit my author page that's on the screen right now, which I welcome you to at the Chicago Sun-Times, you will be able to see my stories over the last perhaps 10, 15 years. In between those years, I took a break from journalism. I spent 2 years in communications in the government sector and another 4 operating my own PR firm, where I managed messaging for government officials as well as the nonprofit sector. And data visualization, of course, has always been a key part of all such messaging. After I began to miss daily news reporting, I returned to the Sun-Times, where I retired a year and a half ago from my Chicago Chronicles column. Long-form articles interrogating social and economic justice issues impacting Black and Brown communities. Today, I am Journalism and Storytelling Program Officer for the Field Foundation of Illinois, disbursing grant funding to nonprofit news outlets throughout the Chicago region. I also write and speak on racial equity issues, locally and nationally. You can follow me, shameless plug, at Maudlyne on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I mean X. But back to the story. For this is, after all, a story about storytelling, about how great storytelling is the measure of both my industry and yours, and how great storytelling ultimately can empower communities, our audiences, which is our shared goal. Let's take a look at the first example. What Africa will look like in 100 years is a classic data story by Britain's Telegraph newspaper. Through scroll-based animation of static images, the newspaper has visualized the jarring numbers for Africa's rapid population growth, expected to quadruple by the year 2100 to 4.4 billion people, impressively visualizing implications revealed in its news reporting. You will be able to click on the links and actually see the data visualization in action when you receive the PowerPoint. So great data journalism, both in its text and its visualization, transcends mere facts. Journalists know that it must resonate on a human level to connect our readers and viewers to their own lives, while educating them to truths that are often hidden and sometimes in plain sight. As World Wide Web inventor Tim Berners-Lee famously noted, data is a precious thing, and it will last longer than the systems themselves. Well, by focusing on our shared humanity, compelling storytelling can disrupt those systems. How, you ask? It can completely transform perceptions among audiences who are uninformed or misinformed. And compelling storytelling can move that audience or the powers that be to take action. Compelling storytelling helps to hold governments everywhere to accountability. I know the theme of this 4th annual conference has been positive disruptions, spotlighting those who challenge conventional organizational norms to find constructive alternatives within your field of data visualization. Well, journalism too owes its current state. Huge competition for readers and viewers in the digital era to the historic positive disruptions that have served to revolutionize how we all consume and share news and information today. As a reporter, editor, and columnist, I navigated journalism's pivot during the 3-decade trajectory, ushering in the internet and the social media. As some of my generation may recall, on April 30, 1993, the World Wide Web announced that this strange thing called the internet was going public, available now to everyone. My newspaper and most in our industry thought it was a fleeting thing. It was not until advertisers began fleeing print for digital that journalism realized we had been caught behind the 8 ball. As we hurried to catch up with this internet, technology again came gunning for journalism. Facebook, 2004, YouTube, 2005, Twitter, 2006, et cetera, et cetera. Again, my industry did not understand what was heading our way. Not until anyone with a cell phone or a laptop was hanging their shingles in cyberspace and calling themselves a journalist did it truly hit us. Citizen journalism meant that traditional journalism, gatekeepers no longer enjoyed their stronghold on the dissemination of news and information. We were forced to pivot. Let's take a look at a second example. Inside the deadly Maui Inferno, Hour by Hour by the New York Times. In this impressive combination of video evidence, data, and interviews, the newspaper has reconstructed the wildfire that raged through Hawaii's one-time royal capital and the cascade of official failures that unveiled the responsibility for the deadliest US wildfire in more than a century. Again, you'll be able to visit these sites and see their data visualization in action. So as I was saying, in those early days of social media, every writer had to learn photography and videography. Why? We had to learn how to otherwise communicate with our readers and our viewers beyond text. The name of the game for journalism had become how to lure readers and viewers in a world where people now had the globe at their fingertips or in the palm of their hands. And behind all this, their attention span was rapidly shrinking. So journalism turned to research. Headlines, images, that's what audiences look for first, studies told us. And that's because the human brain processes visual information 60,000 times faster than text, as researchers at 3M Corporation and the University of Minnesota discovered. And that is the genesis of the evolution of how journalism tells stories today. Today, my friends, visuals completely transcend text. Journalists understand that when you have limited time to capture a reader's attention with your news content, a well-crafted visual can convey the same information quickly. But let me digress from why data visualization is so critical to journalism to share on one more positive disruptor. Following the explosion of digital news sites and social media, communities that long had complained of not seeing themselves reflected in legacy mainstream media or reflected only in stereotypes and in news of trauma, at least here in the United States, began to vote with their readership and their viewership. They left. And just as in any industry, disrupting forces sought to do what we did, but better. Individuals and entities who were part of those ignored and misrepresented communities, or who simply were listening to these complaints, set out to meet those communities' needs. Many bad actors hung their shingles, to be sure, leading to the fake news shenanigans that some politicians eventually used to paint both real news outlets and the pretend ones with the same paintbrush, confusing the American electorate. On the flip side, though, we did see a rise of legitimate individuals and entities who had identified and seized an opportunity to provide stories reflective of diverse communities, to tell those stories accurately, fairly, authoritatively, and contextually. On the screen is a third example by one of these such outlets. Mapping Chicago's racial segregation by Southside Weekly. My hometown has long had a reputation as the most segregated city in America. An investigation by this small community newspaper delved into that history, impressively visualizing the findings of its news reporting on how racist sentiments had manifested through urban planning, housing policies, discriminatory banking, and other practices, confining racial groups to only certain parts of the city. Only a BIPOC-led community news outlet would dig this deep on an issue relevant to them. But back to our story. The exodus in readership and viewership that I told you about happened across the board at newspapers and TV news outlets who were already struggling with dwindling advertising dollars being funneled to a web offering greater reach. So what did that mean? By 2016, my newspaper, the Chicago Sun-Times, had been in and out of bankruptcy twice. Our competitor, the Chicago Tribune, had been in and out of bankruptcy once. Today, across America, an average of 2.5 local newspapers shutter weekly. Yes, weekly. That's according to the 2023 State of Local News report by the Medill Local News Initiative here at Northwestern University, my alma mater. And since 2005, some 2,200 local newspapers have closed, resulting in 20% of Americans now living in what we call news deserts. Those are places with little to no reliable coverage of news and information specific to their communities. That dramatic decline has coincided with an increasingly divided America and a weakening trust in our institutions. And that is why journalism today has become more than just about disseminating information. Audiences are no longer merely passive consumers of information. They are active participants, fueling the community engagement arena we now find within journalism. Audiences demand content that is relevant to their lived experiences, content that is inclusive and diverse, perspectives and narratives. Today, we constantly ask ourselves, how do we build community? Within neighborhoods, within cities, and it always comes back simply to putting community first. Journalism must ensure that we are platforms for all voices to be heard, platforms for dialogue and for collaboration. We know this is the only way to rebuild trust in journalism. Which brings us to today, and back to our discussion of the crucial role that your industry plays in mine. Quite simply, data visualization helps build trust. In an age where misinformation is rampant, transparency is paramount. Data visualization affords journalism that transparency through the sharing of sources, methodologies, and context. Sharing what's behind your numbers and your visualization helps us establish credibility. You see, in today's polarized landscape, audiences seek fact-based journalism. They demand storytelling that engages and holds their attention. They demand content that educates and resonates. And they are particularly drawn to investigative journalism. This is reporting that unveils systemic injustices, wrongdoing, failures, crises, abuses within systems. Again, often hidden in the wealth of data distillable from today's vast web databases and your spreadsheets, but sometimes simply overlooked. Let's take a look at a fourth example. Fatal force. 1,142 people have been shot and killed by police in the past 12 months, by the Washington Post. Again, you'll be able to visit the site and see how they built this data site. After Michael Brown, an unarmed Black man, was killed in 2014 by police in Ferguson, Missouri, the newspaper's investigation found data on fatal police shootings reported to the FBI was undercounted by more than half. Its database-driven approach to depicting those shootings began by logging every person shot and killed by an on-duty police officer in the US, with ongoing analysis. And a 2022 update added accountability by publishing the names of all the police agencies involved. So investigative journalism, the challenge always is translating complex data from investigations like these into digestible insights, not only through compelling narrative, but through your informative and engaging data visualization images. What journalists know is that it is one thing to try to transform perceptions by telling someone something, but it is quite another thing, and absolutely more important, to show them. As the 2018 study by researchers Nyan and Reifler found, data visualization is much more successful than text in that mission. We find, quote, that delivering corrective information in graphical form successfully decreases reported misperceptions. The researchers wrote of their exploration of how best to change people's misperceptions of systems. So if you show them, they're more likely to understand. And according to this research, they're more likely to believe. Data visualization then can mobilize communities. Data visualization can drive grassroots movements for change. But that's not all. Journalists also know that if you show your readers or your viewers, they will stay with you. Yes, data visualization drives up web engagement. Many of you are familiar with author Dick Murray's 2020 book, The Infographic, A History of Data Graphics in News and Communications, which found news stories that included infographics generated up to 30 times more page views than news stories that did not use them. Translating data into compelling visual narratives then is changing how we tell stories, and quite frankly, redefining the very nature of journalism itself. The infographics that your industry creates helps journalists tell stories that resonate on a deeper level. You help us bridge the gap between raw data and human understanding. And you help us breathe life into investigative journalism, so critical to our world today. Many know that some of the most acclaimed data journalism can be found at such legacy news outlets as the New York Times and Washington Post, The Guardian, and The Telegraph, which employ specialist data visualization teams. Hence the fifth example. Europe's record summer of heat and fires by The Guardian. Using real-world aerial shots alongside data graphics, the newspaper has impressively visualized its news reporting on the widespread impact of rising global temperatures after the unprecedented heat and wildfires took place in Europe. Its analysis finding a record amount of fire damage and unprecedented temperatures as countries from the UK to Portugal, Spain, France, and Greece baked across Europe. Again, you'll be able to visit that link and see what they did. But not all outlets have the resources of legacy media to employ such stellar data visualization teams. The good news is that with the rise of new data tools and platforms eliminating knowledge of coding as a requirement, journalists today can frugally complement their data journalism. Some of those tools transforming our work today include interactive dashboards, tools like Tableau, Power BI, and Google Data Studio is allowing journalists to create dynamic, interactive visualizations that enable users to explore data on their own terms, with the ability to display real-time updates, as during the COVID-19 pandemic. Infographics and motion graphics. Motion graphics have taken infographics to the next level, with tools like Adobe After Effects and Canva, enabling journalists to frugally create animated infographics with the ability to convey changes over time. Augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR, are revolutionizing the way that we all experience data by immersing users in a virtual environment. Tools like Unity and Unreal Engine are making it easier for journalists to create them. Geospatial visualization. Tools like Mapbox, QGIS, and ArcGIS are enabling the creation of detailed interactive maps that can reveal patterns and trends relative to geography. Then there are the data journalism platforms. Data Wrapper, Infogram, Flourish, just a few platforms that are providing a range of customizable templates for bar charts, line graphs, maps, etc., eliminating coding skills as a requirement for journalists doing data visualization. Finally, AI and machine learning. AI, of course, is opening new frontiers with the technology's ability to automatically identify patterns, create visualizations, and provide insights not immediately apparent. These widely used tools are not only enhancing our ability to tell stories of patterns, trends, and systems frugally, but empowering our audiences with deeper understanding and insights, not always conveyable through my text. Let's take a look at a final example. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in Maps by the Financial Times. In this project, the newspaper has used a series of maps to provide a visual guide to the war in Ukraine. Regularly updated and combined with various forms of geographical and social data, it effectively conveys the human impact of this ongoing conflict. And again, you'll be able to visit the site and see what they've done. Well, we have come to the end of our story about great storytelling and how great storytelling is the intersection of journalism and data visualization. As international, national, and local current affairs have underscored, journalism has never been more critical to the global conversation about who we are in our communities, in our cities, in our nations, and as connected human beings in one global family. Today, war rages across the globe, from Gaza to Sudan to Ukraine, with tragic humanitarian fallout. In journalism, we must ask ourselves constantly, how do we visualize the horrors of war so that numbers are not just numbers? Post-pandemic global recession currently is hammering global economies, wreaking havoc through rising inflation, lingering COVID-19 supply chain disruptions, unemployment, poverty, and food shortages. How do we visualize these crises so that those numbers aren't just numbers? Political elections are now looming across the globe in some 40 countries, comprising 50% of the global gross domestic product. How do we visualize polarization, poll results, election implications, so that numbers aren't just numbers? And then there's the climate crisis. Extreme weather patterns destroying vast global south regions, homes, and livelihoods, threatening food security and supply chains. How do we visualize climate change to make the data meaningful to news consumers? This, my friends, is the reality of the world we live in today. My industry and yours must ever be cognizant of all of these dynamics, employing simplicity and creativity in our efforts to help news consumers understand and navigate all of these realities. As data visualizers, we need your thought leadership in implementing strategies and innovations to adapt to and excel in telling stories about all of these complexities. Our joint mission is clear: empower communities through effective dissemination of data, through the timeless art of storytelling. Help our audiences make evidence-based decisions that can lead to meaningful change. When people can see the data that affects their lives presented in clear and understandable ways, they are better equipped to advocate for a better world. Outlier 24 understands that change is necessary for advancing your industry. That as data visualists, your industry must seek out where change improves how you do what you do. Well, in journalism, we have that same understanding. Positive disruptors continue to push us to embrace new ways of storytelling and approach our work differently. Together, our two industries can navigate this landscape successfully. Who knows, with the continuing shrinkage of the attention span on the internet, there may well come a day when journalism is simply data visualization, no text. Thanks for sharing your morning with me.
Wow. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. It helps if you turn the mic on. Wow. Just in case you didn't hear it before. I had chills. Thank you. That was like just the best call to action. I feel like as a person in data visualization, like I'm ready to go out and conquer the world now with data. Does anybody else feel that way? Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're gonna open it up to some questions. We've already got a line going, and I'm looking also for my virtual representative there. All right, while he's making his way over to the mic, let's go ahead and start with you to my right.
Yeah, so thank you for that. That was excellent. Very appreciate it. My question was, I guess, around how young journalists are being trained. I worked at my school newspaper in college, and this was 15 years ago now, but this was not something that was really on our radar at all. And I'm curious, from your perspective, as you see young journalists coming up, is this something that more people are becoming literate in? I mean, even in my statistics program in school, data visualization and the idea of data journalism was not discussed. And even the young kids that I talk to now in data science and statistics programs, data visualization still isn't being emphasized. So I'm wondering where the people are being trained to be good at this from a young age.
And Maudlyne, I'm going to just recap the question so that our virtual audience can hear it. The observation is that data visualization and data journalism, that kind of co-concept hasn't really been part of training previously. And so how do people get that training? How do you see it unfolding as it's so important?
Sure, and thanks for that question. What we are seeing, I do serve on the advisory board of the University of Iowa School of Journalism and Mass Communication, my alma mater. And one of the things that has happened in recent years is the addition of data journalism courses. So today, there are specific data journalism courses because of the trajectory that we've talked about and the importance of investigative journalism and what audiences are seeking today. J schools, journalism schools across the country understand that students must be trained, number one, in investigative journalism, and number two, in data journalism and how to translate complex data into compelling narratives. So yes, I think the simple answer is that in most J schools today, there are critical data journalism series courses that students can take to learn this. The industry understands it's critical.
Thank you. All right, Chuck.
Thank you. Question from Nick Muffet about the role of data visualization in long form and investigative storytelling. As a journalist who helped navigate the shift from print to digital and social media, what suggestions do you have for translating these deep data stories to short form media, such as TikTok, Instagram Reels, where more and more people are getting their news? Do we risk losing the benefits of these kinds of stories and the trust they build if we don't meet the audiences where they are?
All right, so to recap that question, how do you take that deep investigative piece and convert it to short form pieces on social media, for example, like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and so on?
Again, good question. And the short answer is really at the heart of where I left you, that there may well come a day when journalism is simply data visualization, no text. And so what that means is that in short form, we must be able to tell those compelling stories through the data visualization. I believe that we can tell those stories on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever our readers and our audience are getting their news today. It's all about creating the most informative, educational, and moving images that translate that complex data into digestible insights. Yes, it can be done. It must be done. It is being done.
Thank you. All right, Susan.
Thanks for your talk. I think my question follows on pretty instantly from that. I think somebody here yesterday called the graphic title a microcopy. So one of the things I struggle with is how to condense complex information, not just graphically, but in the title and in annotations. Do you have tips from a journalist perspective on how to make things both brief and complex?
Okay,
so make them look brief and complex.
Yeah. All right. So the question centers around how do you take a complex topic and kind of boil it down into something brief, digestible, without losing that complexity?
I think I keyed in on the headline and title issue, and that really is a critical issue in this field. What we know, again, is that audiences turn first to the headline and then the image before they even decide whether they're going to read our text. Therefore, yes, the data visualization, the distillation of that complex information is critical in how you did it and what you present in that image. But even more critical, you are absolutely right, is the title of your data visualization, because they will look at that first before they decide whether to look at your data visualization. And how do you do that? It's really simply a word game. It's about, you have to know the information being provided. You have to really reflect on it. The way we write headlines in journalism is we read the story and we reread the story and we reread the story until the essence, the most important nugget rises to the top. And then we play with words. How do we capture what we just read in just 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or an entire sentence? So there really is no magic bullet for how to write the perfect headline, except to read and reread and understand the information that you are translating, and then decipher what is the most critical overarching theme of that particular visualization in writing the caption and the title.
Thank you. All right, to my left.
Thanks for your talk. You said at one point that audiences demand fact-based reporting, but when I think about news outlets like Fox News, and I think that's kind of like a punching bag example, but I think even in the last, the coverage of the Israel-Palestine conflict, it becomes clearer to me that this exists in liberal media as well, that audiences may demand fact-based reporting, but whether or not they care if it's true is a different question. Can you speak to, in data journalism, what are the stakes, or how do we demand truth? And that I know is a crazy question to try to have you answer on stage, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
So just to make sure that I got what you were asking, how do you demand or manage the truth of people caring about the truth of what they're seeing in the data? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think balancing that fact-based reporting and truth-based reporting may not be the same thing, and especially when we're dealing with data visualizations where people tend to come at it and say, that's data, it must be true, but I think we in this room know that's not the case. How do we approach that as data journalists? What's important?
Okay, how do you balance data reporting and truth reporting, and how do we do that?
I think that what I'm taking away from your question goes back to the trajectory of journalism, as we covered how journalism went from certain outlets having all the power to now everyone has the power to disseminate information, and they have the power to disseminate bad information and false information. Okay, so you have everyone from, anyway, I won't name names, but the bottom line is there are certain outlets that we know traffic in false perceptions and the warping of the truth, and quite frankly, pure lies. So that is out there, and that has affected journalism. It led to the fake journalism moniker. It led to audiences leaving, and now audiences must choose. They must choose where they get their news. We hope that audiences will gravitate toward those outlets that are purveying real information, truthful information. And there is nothing, the bottom line to your question, there is nothing that we can do to stop those who are trafficking in misinformation. There is nothing we can do. The only way we can counter that is to continue to provide truth, to dispel those myths. And as you said, you know, one of the things that we've learned in journalism is that if you want to change misperceptions, that one study asked people about falsehoods that were out there that, quite frankly, are being trafficked by certain TV news outlets, and trying to dispel those falsehoods. And what they found is by showing them rather than telling them, when they told them this isn't true, they didn't believe them. But when they showed them the data, they were more likely to change their minds. There is nothing we can do about those who are trafficking in falsehoods in data or in journalism. There is nothing we can do about it. The only thing we do is we fight with the truth.
Okay, I know that we have more questions, but we are out of time, which is sad because I think we could stay here for another 30 minutes and ask questions and talk about this. Will you be able to stick around?
Yes, I
can stick around for just a little. Okay, so Maudlyne is going to be able to stick around for just a little bit. Otherwise, if you can't catch her, then please put your questions in the questions for speakers channel, and we will make sure that Maudlyne gets them. Maudlyne, thank you so much for such a great keynote, and for us, I think, or at least for me, a really good call to action to continue doing what we do and highlighting the importance of it. So thank you so much.